So beginning with announcements, thank you to Sherry and to Debbie for taking care, well, all of you for taking care of the Sangha, and Chelsea and Debbie for leading the Sangha and giving talks on the Buddha's words on dispute and healing disputes? I can't remember. Settling disputes, which come from the book that we've been focusing on, which are the words of the Buddha's teachings on social and communal harmony. And we're coming to the end of it, and I will confess that I actually don't know what we're going to study next, because during sesshin I had so many different ideas and so many things that I was excited about that I'll let you know where it all settles. But I sort of have the feeling that we can't go wrong. I thought, oh, Dogen's Uji, and then I thought, oh, Sando Kai, and then I thought, oh, the Metta Sutta, and then I started Googling, and Bhikkhu Bodhi has a whole new book out, which I just ordered. So we'll get to keep doing this for years and years. There's no end to it. And this Sunday there is a half-day sitting, and with a Sangha meeting in the afternoon at Open Sky. Please let our registrar Gretchen know if you're coming, what part of it you're coming for. If you're coming for the whole day, bring your bag lunch. I looked, I think the weather's supposed to be fine. I mean, it'll be fine no matter what it is, but I think that means not raining. So if you can, come in person. It's nice. It's really, having just come back from sesshin, this really is a warm hand to warm hand, face to face practice. And we're face to face on screen. And it's really nice when warm bodies can be together. There's something that happens. So I want to start there, because part of what we've been doing with these ancient words of the Buddha is exploring how those words have come forward through time and how different teachers have expressed them. And Zen says things really differently, usually. I mean, it's the same thing, but Zen just says things differently than the Theravadan Pali texts. The sesshin, the focus was gratitude. And I'll start with this quote by Norman Fisher, because what we're going to talk about is establishing an equitable society. Seems, I mean, that's the chapter in here. And it does seem to me that the ground of establishing an equitable society is, you could say, it's gratitude, or it is knowing that every being and person is a Buddha and has a place in this world, because otherwise it's just some nice political idea, which is, I mean, I think that's a great idea, but what's the ground of this? Those of you who are at the sesshin already heard the two things that I'm going to say, but that's, as I say, I forget things the minute somebody says it to me, so you can say the same thing to me 100 million times and I'll just keep saying thank you. So from Norman, every thought in our minds, every emotion that we feel, every word that comes out of our mouths, the material sustenance that we need to get through the day, comes through the kindness of and the interaction of others. Not only other people, but non-humans too. The whole of the earth, the soil, the sky, the air we breathe, the water we drink. We are more than dependent on all of that. We are all of that. And all of that is us. So this isn't some nice idea about how we should treat each other. The ground of it is it's us and we are it. This is not a theory or a poetic reflection. It is simply the bald fact of the matter. That's why we are grateful, because we are everything, and everything is us. We can't do without one another. Being is gratefulness. Living is gratefulness. So one of the delightful things about being in an ancient canyon valley and spending hours and hours and days, early in the morning till late at night, is a community naturally forms, and you begin to feel a community with the saguaro cactus and with the canyon walls and with the sun and the moon and the stars. Everything becomes so close that you really have the palpable feeling that you don't know where it begins or ends. And then while we were down there, Mary Koopman was our Shuso, and she gave a really lovely talk, and then we had a Shuso ceremony, which we know from doing here is very tender and poignant and intimate and vulnerable. And Mary sent this out today. It's from David White. Thought it was beautiful because it's just the truth of it again. Is when I think we try so hard to not let our defenses down because it's so much easier when we make other things other. I mean, I love you, but if I keep you over there, then it's just, I mean, we do it in 100 million different ways. We're conditioned beings. And to sit and to practice and to truly be vulnerable, to be willing to feel the pain and the joy of birth and death, and what it is to be alive and a human being, and how much we're in the same boat, that's a whole other ground. So here's what Mary sent. Vulnerability is not a weakness, a passing indisposition, or something we can arrange to do without. Vulnerability is not a choice. Vulnerability is the underlying, ever-present, and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. Vulnerability is. To run from vulnerability is to run from the essence of our nature. The attempt to be invulnerable is the vain attempt to be something we are not, and most especially to close off our understanding of the grief of others. More seriously, refusing our vulnerability, we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence and immobilize the essential title and conversational foundations of our identity. To have a temporary, isolated sense of power over all the events and circumstances is one of the privileges and the prime conceits of being human, and especially of being youthfully human. But a privilege that must be surrendered, but a privilege that must be surrendered with that same youth, with ill health, with accidents, with the loss of a loved one who do not share our untouchable powers. Powers eventually and most emphatically given up as we approach our last breath. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. Our choice is to inhabit vulnerability as generous citizens of loss, robustly and fully, or conversely as misers and complainers, reluctant and fearful, always at the gates of existence, but never bravely and completely attempting to enter, never wanting to risk ourselves, never walking fully through the door. Ooh. You could practice with that one for lifetimes. So I offer that as we enter Buddha. One of the things I'm appreciating about the Buddha, the language of the Buddha, is it's very practical. You know, both of these are, Norman's much more poetic and David White is poetic, and Buddha just kind of like says, he doesn't go on and on about vulnerability and intimacy. He just says, this is how you should live your life, because if you live your life this way, you will. You're going to be happier, and other people will be happier, and the world will be more equitable. So that's what I want to head into here. Bhikkhu Bodhi says in the introduction, in the last part of this anthology, we move from the intentional community to the natural community, proceeding from the family to the larger society and then to the state. The texts included here, and we'll do some today and some on Thursday, reveal the pragmatic astuteness of the Buddha's wisdom, his ability to address practical issues with uncanny insight and directness. Although he had adopted the life of a samana, a renunciate, who stood outside all social institutions, from the distance he looked back into the social institutions of his time and suggested ideals and arrangements to promote the spiritual, psychological, and physical well-being of people still immersed in the confines of the world. So he cared. It's like he became free, and he didn't leave and say, all you poor people, really, too bad. He turned around and he looked at the suffering in the world and at human beings, and then tried, he was called the great physician, tried to give good advice and wisdom to help people wake up and to create families and communities and cultures where people could actually thrive and be happy, which seems enormously helpful these days, since I think many of us would like to stand on the outside and say, too bad. It's really messed up in there, and I don't know what the matter, I'm going to make this up, but some part of us, me, it's like, too bad, it's really screwy, I don't know what we're going to do, but the Buddha didn't go away. He apparently saw the key to a healthy society to lie in the fulfillment of one's responsibility towards others. Maybe I should say that again. Mm-hmm. The key to a healthy society, the key to healthy communities, the key to happiness lies in the fulfillment of one's responsibility towards others. We are deeply and intimately interconnected, and therefore deeply vulnerable to each other, which is, I think, why we close down so much, because I don't want to be vulnerable to somebody I don't understand who looks different than me, or maybe is carrying a gun, or, it's like, you gotta practice. He regarded the social order as the tapestry of overlapping and intersecting relationships, each of which imposed on people duties. So there's a duty with respect to those at the other pole of each relationship in which they participated. It's an interesting language, that we have a duty to turn around and to face towards the world and other people. So let me just go through some of these, and I'll pay attention to time as best we can, and because the more I got into this, the more I was kind of fascinated by it all. He said it happens through relationships, this waking up, this responsibility, this joyful vulnerability and intimacy, and that there are six kinds of relationships through which we wake up. And I'll confess, when I first read this, I thought, that was back in the Buddha's time. I mean, a little bit of me thought that. And the more I read these and entered into them, and I hope it happens with you, it's all exactly the same. I mean, it's just different names. I mean, it was India, and there were castes, and husbands and wives, and I mean, the languages of his time. But I don't see much difference. First is families. You can see why there's so much suffering and sadness in our time. How many things have broken down? Buddha saw the basic unit of social integration and acculturation happen between parents and children in loving and close relationship. That this is what nurtured virtues and humane responsibility essential to social order. It seems to me so much of that has come apart, and a lot of it's economic. He said values are transmitted from one generation to the next, and it's based on faith, virtuous conduct, generosity, and wisdom. So maybe if the traditional family has broken down, we create families in different ways. Maybe you create a family at Enso Village. Maybe we create a family as Sangha. I mean, we'll see as we go on. He suggests other ways. Maybe we, as Westerners, investigate the emotional, psychological of the pain that was transmitted to us through families, and as we heal and wake up, it actually on some deep level heals the entire family system. I mean, there is some deep teaching about time and faith in that as I heal my relationship with my mother and my father, I mean, healing meaning forgiving in my own heart and finding some peace and love, it actually frees them. And it frees the generations before that, because of course it was past. And then it frees that hopefully I'm going to pass on a little more intimacy and vulnerability and wisdom to my son, and he to his children or his adopted children who will come into our family, and it'll get passed on and on. So we have to let our minds get big and soft here. Second, relationship was partners. Buddha said through husband and wife, but intimate relationships. We all know that. People you love the most, and maybe and the people that drive you the most crazy. I mean, in my experience, is the people that we're most intimate with. They're our very best teachers, because that's where we are most revealed to ourselves. Friends are wonderful mirrors, spiritual friends. Then Buddha says employees and employers. Of course it happens at work. It happens in relationships at work. Then he says teachers and students in religious communities, the relationship that happens. And sixth is because in his time it was monastic and lay people that was a very intimate relation too, and an interdependent. I was thinking in our time, it's more, and I'll say some of this on Sunday too, is I think it's so easy to get in a little sangha or in a church or whatever, and then you just start thinking it's your club. You know, it's your own little private, I finally found these people that I can really hang out with, and they're great, and then it's so easy to turn away from the rest of the world, because it's a little more comfortable. But to me, these practices are about learning how to be a little uncomfortable so we can keep extending ourselves. And then he talks about the social behavior of a householder. So you're not in a monastery. In the monastery, there's going to be lots of rules. We talked about that, the Vinaya and precepts. But what about if you're just a householder, which is what we all are? We are all householders. I mean, even if you're ordained, you're a householder. None of us are monastics. We may live in a monastery for a period of time, but we are very much lay people. And he talks about ways of seeking wealth and what you do with wealth. It seems so relevant to me, given I'm sorry, but some of the people running for president, it just looks like people aren't teaching what you do with resources, and how you take care of the earth, but how much money can you have, and then how much can you kind of hoard it, as opposed to being generous and kind. And so the Buddha then says he then says, the proper use of wealth. The Blessed One said to the householder Anathapindika, "Householder, there are 5 utilizations of wealth. What are the 5? Here, householder, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of your brow, righteous wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciple makes themselves happy and pleased and properly maintains themselves in happiness. You make your family happy. You make your partner happy. You make your servants and your workers and your helpers happy, so that everybody is maintained in happiness. You take care of everybody." What a novel idea. This is the first utilization of wealth. The second utilization of wealth acquired by energetic striving, righteously gained, the noble disciple then makes their friends and companions happy, and you share it with your friends and your companions. And then again, what do? The noble disciple makes provisions with their wealth against the losses that might arise because of fires or floods. Whoa. Kings or bandits or unloved heirs, he makes themselves secure against them. That's the third. The fourth is you take care of your relatives, guests, ancestors, the king, the deities. And the fifth is you establish offerings of alms that is heavenly. So you take care of something, a spiritual life that's bigger than your own, resulting in happiness, conducive to heaven. And it really just helps people be kinder, better people. So then Bhikkhu Bodhi says, so the Buddha spoke out against the caste system, but Bhikkhu Bodhi says that he didn't reject the caste system, and Bhikkhu Bodhi's puts forward the premise that in the time of the Buddha, the caste system as it's now known in India, which if you see the movie, and I'll recommend the movie Origins, the caste system isn't just in India, it's more implicit and hidden in our culture and Western cultures. But that maybe at that time it wasn't solidified, that it became more codified into law, became codified through Hindu law, which I think, part of what happened in this country is, if you study the history of this country, I mean, I don't want to go political on you, but Jim Crow laws and things, that there's a lot that's embedded in our laws that made it just, it's everybody's working in the court systems of how do you take care of who can vote and how do you vote and who can buy property and how was wealth handed down. But what Bhikkhu Bodhi says really, really clearly is there is no superior model worth in higher castes. That your deeds are what's the most important thing. That anyone from a social class who does unwholesome deeds lowers your status. People won't see you in the same way. It's like who you are and how you live. It's not how much wealth you have or how much power you have or how much you can manipulate things. And wholesome deeds actually elevate you in the world and how you be and who is admired. Let me just see if there's... Oh, let me just... the Kadiyas are the lower caste, and the Brahmins were on the top. When the Buddha would list the caste systems and the order, is that he would make the Brahmins second underneath the Kadiyas. society should not be ordered by fixed hierarchy, that one caste shouldn't have to serve another. It occurs to me that during the pandemic, it was very clear that there were certain castes serving and that they weren't being taken care of, which isn't, it's not like it's done now, but if you look, you can see this happening. The Buddha said, the supra-mundane dharma is the natural wealth of every person. It's like we're all Buddhas. And whoever observes the principles of good conduct regardless of class is cultivating the Dharma. That's the wholesome way of living. And that's the way he set up his communities, and that's who he taught lay people how to be in the world. And he said, one last thing. Oh, maybe I'll do this next time, but I'll just give you a preview. Is that status is determined by your deeds, how you act. That's the most important thing. So I thought it might be an interesting conversation. Honestly, how do you determine status? Mm-hmm. What do you look for? I told somebody coming home from, I can't remember when this conversation happened during the retreat, is that my son used to judge people by their shoes. And I would think, what a funny kid. I mean, he was really, it's like he had the whole thing codified. He had it down. And then somebody said to me, oh, I know, it was somebody whose mother was divorced and she would date. And this person said to me, when a suitor would come to the door for her mother, because she was little, it was one of the first things she would see is the person's shoes. And she said you could always tell by the shoes. Because if somebody was slick or trying to make like a slick impression, or she said her mother finally married somebody who had really good work boots. And she knew the minute she saw this guy in his boots that this was a righteous person. So I thought, well, maybe my son wasn't so confused about what he was doing. So that might be an interesting investigation, is what do you judge people by at this point? How do you decide who's worthy and not worthy of your attention? And anything else that flows out of that. What is an equitable community? How do we establish that here as a Sangha? And here, I love that we're in the church where they do lots of service work. What does that mean to you, and how would you more and more devote yourself to everybody's, if you take it seriously, everybody's a Buddha. I mean, everybody's a Buddha. Where does that leave you? Okay, so you're going to have not, how about let's just do in groups of two.